Hello everyone and welcome back to another tutorial video. In today's video we're going to look at the third and final part of our super muscular anime man tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to look at our same character but from the side. So we can see the side profile and how all these muscles are going to affect the physique from the side. So like always, I've got a super low opacity construction line layer. If you're doing this traditionally, just draw super lightly with a pencil so that way any corrections you make won't be present in the finalized piece. Next, I will put in our little head circle and a little jaw guideline. I'm not going super detailed on the face or anything. This isn't a face tutorial, so we're just gonna do something like this. Elongate the skull a little bit in the back so it's just slightly like an oval instead of just a strict circle. I want my character to be the exact same size as my other ones, so I'm just gonna slightly enlarge his head, move it up a bit so I can get the same height, just so my overall page looks nice. Alright, so from here, we're gonna draw in our spine as a guideline. So this line is gonna change a lot as we work on it, so don't be upset if you can't just get it right on the first try. I'm not gonna be able to either, and it'll see a lot of changes as we go, but for now, we want to start kind of at the base of the skull here, right before it kind of looks more like an oval. Draw in our neck, down into almost like a shoulder blade region, and follow that straight down till it's about even with the neck again. And then stick it a little bit out for the butt. So we're going to adjust this a lot as we go, but this is just going to kind of help us remember we've got to have the spine curved a little bit, and we'll go on from there. So next what we will do is draw in our shoulder line, and the shoulders, I like to make them about one jaw length lower than the chin, okay? So about a jaw in between our shoulder line here. And then from that, we'll put in our rib cage and just kind of like a slightly flattened shape like this, okay? Now, even though our character is going to be super muscular, we don't actually want the ribs to come further forward. It's okay to extend them to the side to build a bigger frame to put muscles on, but from this angle, the ribs are going to look a little bit boxy, and no matter how jacked you get, you're not really going to extend the front of the ribs out further, so we'll just stick with that. From there, about a head height below the base of our ribs, we'll put in a line for our hips, and the hips will come pretty much in line, maybe just a little bit behind the peak of our rib cage placeholder, just something like that. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, just putting something in for reference. And then what we'll do is immediately adjust our spine line. So that way, in between these two shapes is where the back bends. And then from there, we'll draw in some abs to connect these along with the lowermost ab, like so. And we can frame those out. So we'll have our character still pretty lean. Sometimes if you're like a super big bodybuilder, they can get kind of like a bloated looking stomach, but that's because they're on all sorts of steroids and stuff, so their stomachs can bloat up like that. So we're just gonna ignore that and just keep his stomach relatively flat, but we're gonna have pretty deep ridges like this, right? So it's gonna go, he's at low enough body fat that there's not a whole lot between the abs, so really sink them in, exaggerate the space between them, and just kind of build off from there, okay? From there we can kind of mark them out with the ribs right here, and then what we'll do is put in our leg. So I'm going to just a straight line from the center. I'm going to use the same general area as my ground for the other two. From there, about a jaw's length above the ground, I'll go ahead and put in my ankle. And then about at the halfway point between the ankle and the hip right here is where I'll put my knee. And again, the kneecap sits in front of the knee joint, so we're not marking out the joint, we're going to mark out the kneecap. So we'll do something like that. And then we can just begin probably drawing the leg first. So again, on our male characters, especially the super jacked ones, the thickest point of the quad will be right above the knee almost, okay? So something like this. And we can adjust as necessary as we go, but for right now, it's looking pretty good. But then for the hamstring, the thickest part of the hamstring is actually right below the glutes, like this. This is where the majority of everything meets up right here, and then the parts connecting to the back of the knee are kind of like straps. From there, we want to give want to make sure that he's got glutes, but they're not going to be as round as on our female characters. It's going to appear to be kind of almost like a square that every time it needs to like move in a new direction, we want that to be slightly rounded, okay? So just kind of mess with it to get the shape, like something like that right there is pretty good. Just because when our male characters are at super low body fat, the glute muscle almost looks more like a just kind of a flattened, squared off piece of muscle, okay? From there, kind of in the middle of our hip section, we'll even add these little dimples. So this is kind of where the glute and like some of the quad and stuff is coming up and meeting. So we'll just add a little dimple effect there. Connect this down like so. From there, we can add in the kneecap like this, with plenty of the muscle hanging over the knee, because there's so much muscle on his leg that it's kind of just hanging off of his leg at this point. And then from there, just like on our previous muscular character, he's going to have some muscle in front of the overall shin bone. So if this is the shin bone, there's actually going to be a little bump before. And we'll exaggerate that bump on this character because he's much more built than our previous one, okay? There's just like a little strap of muscle right there on front. So now we'll draw in the little tendons back here and then really give him some exaggerated calves. And remember, there's like a strap of muscle like this underneath the faces of the calves that we see. So this face of the calf is almost going to be kind of flat and sharp, and it just gets pushed out into the sides by this meatier, more tubular muscle right underneath of it. So we want to keep the part of the calf that's most exposed looking a little bit flattened off, a little more angular, but then of course give it enough rounding that it still looks like a calf, you know. So we'll do something like that. I'm gonna tone down the exaggeration of this real quick. It was hanging a little too low, something like that. That looks better. From there, we'll go ahead, draw in our foot. It's not a foot tutorial, so I don't care at all what this foot looks like. I just am using it as a placeholder, just so it looks like he can support his own weight. So we'll do that. From there, we'll go ahead and draw in the upper body. So now we want to make sure we have a shoulder circle, and on our super big characters like this, we want to make that shoulder circle pretty much the same size as our head circle. And then I'm going to bend my character's arm kind of out of the way up to here, and I want this circle to be kind of just completely bisected by this hip line here. And then essentially that middle part is where we will then put the elbow socket. And again, because our character is so big, we kind of have to just go purely by visuals. It's kind of a lot harder to use the rib cage to open up in here to figure out where our joint is going to be. Like on some of our other characters, they'll have their ribs, it opens up, and generally this is where the elbow joint will fall, somewhere in there. But on this character, we're kind of just building him piece by piece and trying to make him look proportional. So once we've got that, now we can go ahead and draw in the shoulder. So I'm going to go shoulder section by section, okay? Because when the character is this muscular, it's not going to just be like one round shoulder. It's actually, you're going to see separation between the faces of the shoulder, okay? And so you can kind of mess with the shape here. Definitely you can look at references to see. It's very hard to get the shoulder at this body fat percentage to just look like a complete circle. And on top of that, you kind of need to keep in mind that the middle section of the shoulder is most noticeable when the character's looking at you straight ahead, or if they're got their back turned to you, because that's kind of like the widest part. It really makes the shoulder pop out to the side. Whereas the front shoulder is usually people's most developed section of the shoulder because of like all the benching and stuff that they do. So we're going to give a generous kind of angular like L shape here. And that's going to meet up to the middle head here. And this will be a little bit more visible once we actually get into the line art. But for now, just kind of bear with me. And then give him a generous little bump here for the rear delt, okay? Because since his arm's being pulled back, it's actually making the rear delt right here flex and contract so it can pull the arm back. So it's not going to be like a relaxed shoulder like if we've got this, with maybe we can see some of the bump coming out from the front delt, and then we can see kind of this for the side. So it kind of looks like a interesting circle shape. Instead, this in the back is going to be popping a little bit more because it's actually pulling the arm back, okay? From there, we can kind of just follow the shoulder down to almost a point, and then pull our bicep and give him some really big biceps since he's really jacked. Pull it and then swoop it down into the elbow joint. And from there, we can give him big triceps. The triceps from this angle, are not going to really connect all the way at the same point as the bicep, because at this side we're just going to really see the short head of the tricep. So we'll do that. Connect it down to the elbow and here, and then from here right up in front have a generous little poke for the forearm muscle, but then on the outside give a more generous forearm muscle, because basically this outside portion here, the main meat of this forearm muscle, connects to our bicep. So when he's doing all of his curls, it's also working this section out, whereas this section here is mostly just used for grip strength. So it's a bit harder to get this to develop as large as this section of the forearm. So we'll do something like that. And then from there, not a hand tutorial, so I'm just using a placeholder here, something like this, okay? Now from there, this time instead of coming from the very top of the shoulder and then coming down into the collarbone, I'm going to kind of come out from just below the peak of the shoulder, just because the shoulder is so well built that it's from this angle is going to be slightly above the collarbone. And then coming off the ribs, we'll just mark like that to show that little section there in the collarbone. Then we want to connect the front of the neck so it's basically running in line with the ribs. There's really not much of a difference there. And so if we want to adjust the thickness of our character's neck, really don't get too flexible with this portion here, because then it starts looking like there's a big shelf, and that's not correct. So instead, we'll adjust the back portion here. Now, we want to give him some really big traps, and so we'll even show some definition there that then comes up into the neck like this, okay? So don't be afraid to keep this base portion nice and thick, because that's a whole major muscle group on the back, okay? Now we can draw in the lats. So with his arm pushed back like this, I can't really show you how the back gets really thick, because essentially when you build all this muscle that we have on our character's back over here, that muscle gets thick, and in some cases it can get just as thick as your chest. And so what will happen is, if you're just sitting there with your arms to your side, what we would normally see on a normal character is they have their arms like this, off to the side, shoulder, and so you wouldn't really see behind their arm, like maybe a tiny poke of the shoulder blade if their arm is very skinny. But on a really well built character like this, you know, they've got their shoulders like this, they've got their triceps, they got the biceps, they got all of this, they got the chest. But what you wouldn't be able to see, or what you would have to keep in mind, is that the back is so thick that it's got to go somewhere, and so you might even see the back kind of scrunched up behind the arm, something like that, okay? All because that lat has to go somewhere, and when it's not being spread out to the side, it just bunches up and gets real thick like a pec. So for this particular pose with his arm back, we're not going to really see that, but just keep in mind that the overall thickness of your character from the side is going to get more exaggerated when they have larger and larger muscle groups, okay? So from here, though, we'll just connect his lats like what we've been doing, just way down at like the base of the ribs, okay? And these things would basically run up through here like a really thick shell, okay? But for now, we're just going to see a little bit of them. From there, just like what I already explained, is that kind of running across the shoulder and coming right up to the collarbone is where the upper chest on our men will actually be riding up to. So there, it's not like a lady where the breast kind of starts below the shoulder line. The real big bodybuilders can build their chest basically starting just from the collarbone, because the upper chest can get pretty big. It's really hard to do, but when our character's this jacked, he'll definitely be able to get it done. So we'll have a super exaggerated chest here, and we kind of just want to shape it something like that, right? Like, you don't want to bring it too far out, and you don't want to really curl it, because then it looks like a boob. But instead, we want to keep it curved. Kind of every time you have to change directions, you could give it a little bit more of a sharper like angle. Like, you don't want to make it look too sharp, but something like this would be perfect. So we'll do that. I'll kind of less plump up here at the upper chest. Do this so it can kind of looks like it's connecting, like so. And then right in here, we would have the muscles that run on the ribs. I'll kind of move this lat right here, this little inside line, like so. So there we go. So now I'll go ahead and do the line art here, and I'm just going to do this quickly. I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time, but we'll start here, do this. So I'll just get this out of the way, and then we'll go through at the very end and do a review of everything, and I'll try to remember to mention anything that's worthwhile. Do this into the collar. Oops. Oh no, that was right. Sorry, I got messed up. The little line here to show the traps, I got confused and thought it was my neckline. From here, we can even make it so the shoulder isn't just like one big piece right here, because the front delt is really closely connected into your pec, and so we don't need to make this just its own circular shape like this. You could do it if you want, but it's not really necessary. And then we'll really bring up and poke up the rear delt more than what it would normally be, because it's pulling our arm backwards. We'll do this, mark it out. We'll add in our bicep, nice and thick, and then just kind of taper it quickly at the very base. And the forearm. Remember to keep the wrist joint here a little bit thicker on our muscular characters, because then it is a little too jarring if they're forearms like this, but then it tapers into that. You know, it's a little bit too extreme. So we'll do this. So we can even add in some definition there with the little pit of the elbow, which I don't know what it's called. So for now it's the pit of the elbow. Then we can attach our lat, the rib muscle, bring this down into our chest, which can kind of connect up to there. Then that's the base of our rib, like where it kind of opens up. Then we've got our abs with the lowermost ab there, which is just kind of a big old flat piece of muscle. And then from here we can add in our hip. Then we'll go ahead and do the glute here. It's a little too boxy, something like that. It's okay to poke it out. He's got large glutes because he's a well-built character, but we just don't want to make it look super rounded, because then it starts looking like a lady's anatomy. So we'll do that. Then we'll bring the quad thickest point kind of above the knee. Add in our kneecap here, like so. Thickest point of the hamstrings up in the glute area. Then it kind of just reaches out into our calf, which then bumps into here. Little bump for the muscle on front, like so. And we can kind of define this. Then we can put in our foot. Simple foot. And then, okay, that's basically everything. So I'm going to take a step back, make sure that my anatomy is like acceptable, and make sure the proportions are good, and I'll let you guys know if I have to change anything. So for right now, I'm going to quick do that, and then we'll wrap this up with a quick review. Alright, so I didn't end up changing anything. There's one thing that we can add that I forgot to mention, because it's kind of a little bit obscure. But basically, if you see over here, you can see the X shape here for our lower back muscles. As your character gets more and more developed, this portion here will actually start coming out a little bit further than the spine, okay? Because it's going to stick out kind of on top of it. Now, we don't need to bring it past this main like meat here, but it's just something to keep in mind that as your character gets bigger and bigger, these sort of lower back muscles will even be more visible than what they would be, whereas before we're just kind of looking at the spine. But here we can see now that it's like, okay, well, there's actually like a lot of muscle going on, and so we can kind of do something like that to show that there's actual straps of muscle on his back that are so developed that you can see them. So that's just something you can do. If you don't do it, most people aren't going to notice, but if you're trying to make it as realistic as you can, don't be afraid to keep this section here really toned, but still give it a lot of thickness where these muscle groups are kind of exaggerated and poking out, okay? But other than that, that's pretty much what we want. Again, neck, keep this portion here nice and thick, because there's the traps. Head could kind of be pulled back a little bit more, something like that, maybe, just because the skull's kind of elongated in the back. Shoulders, the front of the delt can kind of merge into the chest, so you can leave it open. You could close it like that if you want, it's up to you. Rear delt, with our arm in this position, it's going to be flexing and pulling, so if you want just a neutral shoulder, you can do something more like this, something like that. The rear delt is typically the smallest head of the shoulder, then this one's typically the biggest, and then this one is second biggest, but from the side here it just kind of pokes in like that. Arms, make sure they're nice and thick. This, I guess we can actually get rid of this portion right here, because that'd be something weird like this. But yeah, so basically that's what we want to do. Last thing I know again is the quad is going to be thickest right here, and then the hamstring is thickest right here, because all of this is like where the main meat is, and then it sweeps into kind of like tendony strings. That's why I call it hamstring, because that just kind of connects to the back of the knee. So either way, hopefully you found this one helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.